Hi everyone, this is take 2 of Doula Dialogues, episode 7. We're talking about what foods to feed baby first. And I'm saying this is take 2 because we were having some issues with my guest, Katya. Katya's in Arizona writing a book, and I'm trying to get her on live, and we're trying to do the first take, and I hope you're all doing really well. Today we're talking nutrition, and what does that mean? You know, nutrition is such a great topic to talk about. We're talking about when to start feeding baby. We're talking about what foods to start baby on, and you know, what about allergies and intolerances? What about special diets? That was the one question I had for Katya. You know, what if you're vegetarian or vegan? And that is what we want to dive into. Katya is an author. She's a nutritionist. She's from here, but she is taking a little 3-week sabbatical to write her book out in Arizona, which is a lot of fun. She's written a great book, and I wish I'd had this book. I have it here. Where did I put it? Oh no, I've lost it here. Here, it's Your Baby's First Foods, and I really wish I'd had it, during when I started 10 years ago feeding my kids. And it was very different back then. It was very regimented, and it was you have to start feeding baby these certain foods at this certain time, and this month was this and this month was that, and start with cereals and then move to a vegetable and then a fruit and then meat. And now you're also lucky as new moms. It's really simple, much more simple for you than I find, now it's free for all. You want to feed your babies a certain food, then you can, and that's great. The question one of my clients had on our take 1 was, when should we start, introducing solids? And there is a debate that I see with my clients. The debate is between 4 months and 6 months. And I know in Katya's book and in what Health Canada says and what my pediatrician was saying is that 6 months is the best time to start introducing your solids to babies. Some babies, of course, can be ready ahead of time. What does that look like? Well, a baby should be able to sit properly, perhaps not fully on its own by 6 months, but that it is quite solid in its high chair, in his or her high chair. If your baby's interested in foods, some babies are really, they're grabbing your food, they're trying to put it in their mouth, and we're stopping them because we're not sure if they're ready or not. If they are looking at food and wanting it, there is an interest there. Making, sounds like sounds that they want to be, I want to have what you're having. Give me that drumstick. Katya, I'm trying to, but I'm still not able to connect you here. If you could, I need you to be able to connect, and on your thing you're not able to just yet. So if you could try again, that would be great. So 4 months. I mean, some babies will be ready a little bit earlier. I'll be honest. I did try. I know Tristan, at 5.5 months, we started on, I think it was rice cereal. I can't say that he was too keen on rice cereal, but, once we started moving into the vegetables and the fruits, that was really, much more yummy for him. The other thing, that would be about the signs, what to look for. The one question I did have for Katya, and if she's trying to join in yet still and can't, but was I have clients whose babies are not interested. I'd love to hear, there's a lot of moms on here. I see Lisiane and Isabelle and Katerina. Are your babies interested in food, and have they started, feeding? Have you started feeding, and what have you been feeding them? I'd love to hear it. I'd love to see what you're all doing. that, you know, one woman I had met, one of my clients, she said her baby was 10 months and was really not interested at all. She would try a whole bunch of stuff. In the end, you know, he did, you know, start eating solids. But for him, it just took, and she just tried every meal, sitting him in his chair and trying certain things. And eventually he did. Okay, Katya, I think we can try getting you on now. It says that I can. Hopefully, cross everyone's fingers that this will work. Definitely.
Take three.
Sounds okay.
Okay, let's keep our fingers crossed.
Let's keep our fingers. My legs are crossed. My fingers are crossed. So if you've been listening, Katya, we were just talking about when the right time is to start. I don't know if do you have anything else to add to what to look for?
I think it's great what you said, like I mentioned in take one. I think it's really important for people to remember that the official Health Canada recommendation for when to start is at around 6 months. So if you're getting pressure from family, from friends, from anyone else, it's always nice to have some good hard data to go back on. And even sometimes I've even seen pediatricians encourage families to start earlier. You can start earlier if you feel your baby's ready, like you said, sitting up more or less by themselves and reaching for foods and isn't interested. It's fine, but don't feel pressure to start earlier if there's no medical reason to do so. 6 months is fine for most babies.
And what about that client of mine whose baby was not interested to he was 10 months and still exclusively breastfeeding. Like she was, you know, tired and she kept offering and offering. Eventually he took it. But what do you say to those moms?
First of all, great job. That's really good parenting. Just keep offering. At 6 months, some babies are trying to grab food off your plates and others are just happy. They're happy breastfeeding. They have no interest. At that point, I say, just try bringing your baby into your family rhythm. Baby's at the table with you when you eat. Hopefully you're eating family meals at least once in a while. Include your baby with you, especially at that point if your baby's sitting up and you want to start the baby-led feeding that we're going to talk a little bit more about, and you give your baby a couple of things in front that they can explore and play with. It's about experimentation and exploration. So keep offering. Never force. We want to be a responsive feeder. We'll talk a little more about that, but that's the perfect approach. Keep offering and eventually baby will be ready.
Right. I was mentioning before when we start to talk about what foods to start, and I was mentioning that how 10 years ago it was so regimented and I had my check boxes and I checked everything off, and it started with cereals and vegetables, and now we're moving to this baby-led weaning, and I know you talk about it in your book. But going from, you know, what's your recommendation?
All right, good. Things have changed. They certainly have changed, and even just the age of introduction. Before it was more 3-4 months. You talked about some people even putting baby cereal in the bottle.
Yeah.
Which we really don't do anymore, and it's not recommended. Waiting a little longer, understanding that breast milk or a substitute is the best food for your baby till they're close to 6 months old. And before that, we did have specific lists. We wanted to start with baby cereal pablum for the iron, which is still an important component, and we'll talk some more about that. But basically, there's no fixed food you must start with. There's no perfect first food. You can go with the flow. And for some parents, they love it. They're like, great, my baby can just start eating what we're eating. And other parents feel kind of lost with that. They're like, but I wanted my list and I needed to know what to do. And that's fine too. So if you feel comfortable, there still are lists. You can take your First Years with Baby, the book that you get with your doctor.
The Tiny Tots.
Yeah, Tiny Tots in English. I forgot what it was called in English. There's lists, but just understand that there's suggestions. So at this point, again, coming back to the Health Canada recommendations, they're saying at around 6 months, included in the first foods, you want to make sure there's a good source of iron, ideally up to 2 times a day. So what are the good sources of iron? Definitely the baby cereals that are fortified with iron, but it can be meats and eggs, and other meat substitutes are also really great forms of iron. So you can start with those, whereas before, and the reason they've put those as a highlight is that people would start with vegetables and fruits. And by the time baby was 9, 10, 11 months old, that's when they would start eating meat or meat substitutes.
Right.
And they were finding that the risk of low iron or anemia was a little bit higher. So that's why they're just putting a bit of a spotlight on that.
You mentioned eggs. Eggs for me when my kids were little were not a no-no, but I think they were telling us, was it either to, I can't even remember now, to eat just the egg yolks?
Yeah,
or the egg white.
There used to be no egg whites before 2 years old.
Yeah, and now it's not that.
No, it's not that at all. This all stems from the idea, and again, nutrition and medicine is such an evolving field, so take everything with a grain of salt, right? It was the thought that in order to prevent food allergies, we should delay the introduction of certain foods. And eggs are one of the top foods in terms of, there are about 8 foods, and I have them listed in my book, that are cause about 90% of food allergies in young children and babies. And eggs are one of them. So the idea was, and the same was for peanut butter, even at one point it was, when you're pregnant, don't eat peanuts. You might prevent allergies in your babies. But now, evolving science, we've realized that delaying the introduction of a food is not going to prevent an allergy. So, and then some data is even starting to show that with early introduction and basically sort of stimulating the body to get used to it, there may even be prevention of allergies from that. We don't know. But basically from 6 months on, the door is open. You can feed your baby any foods, real foods though. We're not talking about donuts that I put in one of my posts on Facebook. We don't need to offer our baby sugar and salt. They're just things that they don't need. Spices are fine. Go ahead. It doesn't have to be boring, blah food. Spices and flavors are really great, but we just come down to basic foods and not processed foods.
Yeah, I would think with all the different cultures, they don't stop feeding themselves, spices. JP says, I got some questions in the comments, but I don't see them. So I don't know if you see them, Katya, and feel free to read them. I don't have the question here, so I only see who's watching.
Okay, hang on, I'll try to get.
But about the peanut butter, that's I remember eating a lot of peanut butter when I was pregnant, and so much that JP was like, maybe you shouldn't eat all that peanut butter. The kids are gonna have major allergies. And I was like, no, I love it too much, and I still want it. And the kids, thank heavens, when we first gave them that little bit of peanut butter on their, just putting a dab, I think, on their lip to see if there would be a reaction. We were like just waiting for that reaction. And thank heavens, none of our kids have peanut allergies. But that was something that we were like really worried about. And fearful. We didn't want them to have, and they love peanut butter now, thank heavens. But I know so many people have issues with intolerances and allergies. One of the questions about I was mentioning before at the beginning, even if you do baby-led weaning, it doesn't mean you cannot. It doesn't mean you can't do purees if you like doing purees, or the cereals or whatnot. What was my train of thought there? No, I've lost it. That's okay. So about the gluten, the wheat cereals. That's one thing I was mentioning. Someone mentioned that, we shouldn't give our babies those cereals because we don't want to develop a gluten intolerance.
Okay, so that wheat is actually one of those foods that I mentioned. I'll just pull up the page and read them all to everybody because I noted what page it was on. So there are 8 foods that cause about 90% of the allergies in kids. So cow's milk, eggs, peanuts, soy, wheat, tree nuts, fish, and shellfish. That said, there, at this point anyhow, we don't have any evidence that delaying those introduction of those foods is going to benefit anyone. What we do ask is that when those foods are introduced, those are the few foods that we're going to introduce one at a time. So for example, you're not going to give your baby eggs for the first time one day and wheat first time the next day and soy the next day. You're going to wait a couple of days in between just to see if there's any, if your baby vomits right away, if your baby has the next day. At least you can pinpoint what it is. But once you know that it's safe and your baby, and mix it with other foods and introduce other things. So wheat cereal is one of them. And this, again, it's a field of nutrition that's evolving. Even just our knowledge about celiac disease and gluten intolerance, it's a big field right now, and there's so many things that seem to affect it. There's tons of research being done just about the microbiome and the gut, the bacteria then in baby's gut, and we know that's affected by the birth route, whether it's a vaginal delivery or C-section, how that mouth and the baby is colonized, and breastfeeding definitely has an impact on that. So a baby who's exclusively breastfed may not have the same reactions as a baby who's had other products early on. So it's an evolving field. So just consider wheat as one of those 8 foods and treat it that way. Sylvia, I do have the questions here in
Good, read them out, because I can't, I'd like to know what they are.
Yeah,
Can,
so there seem to be a bunch here, so I'll try to go in order. Oops, here we go, I just lost them. Let me find them again. Hi,
while you're doing,
can you post your book? We'll put a link to the book at the end of the talk.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Put them in the comments.
Ellie here asks, are there any foods to avoid giving at the beginning apart from honey? Thank you for bringing honey up, Ellie. Honey is the one food that Health Canada is saying wait until 1 year old, because there is a botulism spore that is rarely but could be present and be serious. Apart from that, you want to avoid raw or unpasteurized foods such as sushi, unfortunately, uncooked fish, your steak tartare, wait a little bit also for that. Eggs should be well cooked. And again, I tell people it's kind of like, get the information and make your choice. If you've got chickens in your backyard and you know where they're from and you know everything's clean and healthy, and you choose to give your child an egg with a runny egg yolk, that's perfectly okay. It's up to you to decide, but know where your foods are coming from. So basically, we're just doing sort of food safety to the extreme for the first couple of years, just because if a baby does get a food poisoning, it's got more serious consequences than for an adult. If somebody asked, Katerina, I hope I'm still saying your name right, if pieces are okay and they don't choke. Maybe we could talk a little bit about the baby-led weaning approach, Sylvia, because I find a lot of—
Yeah, I'd love to. Yeah.
So baby-led weaning is a term that was kind of coined around 2010 when Jill Rapley wrote a book called Baby-Led Weaning in the US. It's basically, the idea behind it was that because babies weren't starting foods at 3 or 4 months, they were starting foods more at 6 months, and they were able to sit up and bring things to their mouth themselves. It was to avoid the time that people had to spend making purees. So the idea was to give baby foods that you were eating, your family is eating at home. It doesn't mean little tiny pieces. I think that the biggest concern when people hear about baby-led weaning, and again, sometimes I like to call it baby-led feeding, because the term weaning has a different connotation in North America as in Europe. In the UK, weaning foods means you're starting to give your baby foods. Here we talk about weaning as weaning away from the breast or the bottle, but the idea is it's first food. So the idea is that we're letting the baby determine how much they eat and how they eat. So you're giving them foods that at that point they're only grasping with their hand, right? They can't do the pincer grasp, but they'll develop more at 8 or 9 months old. So we're giving them big pieces of food that they can pick up with their fist. And initially what you'll see the first times is they don't quite get their mouth, their head, their face. Did you do it with your kids a little bit, Sylvia?
We did, especially like bananas and pieces of avocado, cooked carrots, that they would, it's a lot of fun. I was mentioning that's a time when exploration and you have more food on the floor than you often do in the mouth, but it's a lot of fun. Take videos, take pictures. It's a great
messy.
time.
It's messy. Let your child make a mess, but again, remember, it's about exploration. And in the book and on there are lots of lists of first foods, but sort of rules of thumb is make sure it's at least as big as your finger. And then if your baby picks it up, it's squishable. So think of a roasted carrot or steamed vegetable or a ripe banana or an avocado. You can leave peel on at the bottom so baby can hold it a little bit better. The peel of the avocado, the peel of the banana, but it doesn't just have to be fruits and vegetables. People think of that, but they can, an omelet that you cut in strips, or you can take pancakes or toast that you've cut in strips and maybe even put a little almond butter or peanut butter on it, scrambled eggs, pasta. They're just going to play with it, and initially more goes everywhere, but eventually it goes into their mouth. People like taking, if you eat meat, a drumstick of a chicken, take out that little pointy bone, take off the skin and let your baby kind of gnaw on it, suck on it. A piece of steak, a piece of meat. People like to make croquettes and boulettes and little, you know, things like that. But again, the idea is that you're trying to simplify your life here. If you love making purees, go for it. That's great. And believe me, that time lasts, it's only a couple of months. And when you look at your child's life, those 2 months where you're making purees is great. And sometimes, again, it's practical to do a combination. There's no one right way to feed your baby. Remember that, all of you. You're not doing it wrong if you're doing it differently than your friends or your neighbors. The idea, the basic idea is that you're feeding your baby real foods and that you're being a responsive feeder. In other words, you're letting your baby determine how much they're eating. Whether you're spoon feeding and your baby is opening their mouth, we know, right? When a baby's ready to eat, they're super excited.
Yeah.
Not enough, that mouth clamps shut, the head turns. No more airplane games trying to entice, right? So baby determine the quantities, and that's when you're being responsive. You're bringing them into a rhythm, sitting at the table, making it a pleasant atmosphere, and then sometimes they'll pick things up. You can give them 1 or 2 things on their high chair tray, or if they're on your lap on the table. And then some things, of course, they're going to want to use a spoon. Yogurt, cream, purees of applesauce, right? There's nothing.
That's I really, that is the one line that I underlined. Well, I underlined a few, Katya, but there is no one way to feed your baby, and I really, really like that. And I think keeping that in mind is so important, because we always want to be the perfect moms, right? We want to be doing things the right way, and this gives us a lot of that flexibility. And I think being adventurous, I tried foods for my baby that were on the list that I was given that I would never perhaps not eat myself, you know, and it did allow us to be a little bit more adventurous.
Yeah.
One thing I wanted to bring up throughout this, the word weaning, we still want to be feeding our babies milk at this time, right? We're not all of a sudden going from no milk or full-on breastfeeding or supplemental feeding to just foods. Yeah. This is, we're introducing perhaps 1 food a day, or 1, you know, are we even replacing a meal a day at the beginning?
Well, at the beginning, Sylvia, we're gonna, around 6 months, again, bring your baby to the table with you. So if your baby happens to be awake, obviously we're not going to change their whole rhythm if they actually have one for a week or 2. But if your baby's up at meal times, let them sit on your lap or let them sit in a high chair, and then give them something. So if they're starting to do that at least a couple times a day, eventually they'll start eating a little bit more. The idea is, you know, sure, go try to offer a couple times a day again if it's convenient. But that's the important thing. We call them weaning foods, or they're called complementary foods. So they are in addition to the milk that they're already drinking. If you're breastfeeding, continue to breastfeed on demand.
Yes.
As you have, we know that Health Canada recommends breastfeeding up till 2 years or beyond, whatever suits you. If you're thinking about weaning, sometimes the food can help take the place, but the food is not replacing the milk at this point. Breast milk or a substitute is still going to be the primary food for most babies until around 1 year of age. It's a gradual transition, and again, every baby is different, and you know your baby best, so trust yourself. You know, one baby might be eating 6 different foods within 2 days, and another one at 10 months is just starting to explore. So you don't have to stick to 1 new food a day rule, except for those 8 allergenic foods that we talked about. Other than that, go with the flow and let your baby try what you're eating, or prepare some things on the side. And just, you'll see that some moms or some parents don't find they see any difference with the milk patterns, and others do see a difference because their babies are so happy to be eating and they're going for it. There's no real rule. We used to, even when my daughter was little, it was, oh, you must breastfeed half an hour before you sit down at the table.
Right.
Oh, goodness, trying to schedule that between naps and trying to actually keep a shower.
Cooking.
What are you supposed to feed this baby?
No.
Right?
Yeah.
So
as long as
kind
you
of works.
keep putting them to rest.
Yeah. So sometimes a little bit of breastfeeding before the meal, just so their hunger is cut out. Then they eat, then they breastfeed afterwards. Go with the flow. Again, just trust yourself. You're not doing anything wrong. There's no one way to do it.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. What about, I know I've got clients who are vegetarians and vegans. I would imagine the iron, I mean, these people who vegetarians and vegans know about their iron and their intakes. What do you recommend in terms of, feeding baby and keeping that, that diet in their family?
Yeah, absolutely. You can do that. You can definitely raise a baby without any meat or animal products. And as people, hopefully that you're doing it, you're well informed yourself. So if you're eating a good varied diet, your baby can eat those exact same things. Again, be conscious of including a couple of iron-rich foods every day in your baby's diet. There's lists in the book, but again, the eggs, tofu, beans, legumes, and if you're using baby cereals, also you can do that. If you're having no animal products at all, then it would be more from the legumes. You can use nutritional yeast. You can include flaxseed, chia seed for your omegas, your fats in there. The other thing to be aware of is B12. So if you're not using foods that have B12, if you're completely vegan, that's something that a lot of vegan adults will take a supplement of, something to consider for your baby. And I believe, Sylvia, you can tell me, is it still standard practice to check for iron status for babies at around 1 year old, or do we do that anymore?
That does not ring a bell for me.
Okay, so
the iron, unless it's done in a, well, no, I don't. No, it's not on my list. I don't.
So I was in the U.S. I was in the U.S. when my daughter was 1, and that was standard practice. They gave a little finger prick to baby.
A little prick at 1 year old?
Yeah.
No, besides the vaccines, I don't recall my kids going in for.
I'm trying to pull up
maybe
the
no.
Sorry, there's some other questions, but I'm seeing.
Yes, go ahead.
I'm only seeing the last 5 comments, but it says there's 12 comments here, but for some reason they're not all showing up. If you have a question, would you mind just reposting it right now? And I'm looking at the screen and I'll see it.
Yeah, it'll come up. Yeah, I don't see any of the comments this time around.
Here's one. What about meat? Babies need meat before 1 year old with a question mark. So no, they don't need meat. Absolutely not. As long as you're choosing some other good protein and iron sources, there are plenty. We don't need to include meat. If you want to include meat, that's fine, but it's not a necessity. Here's another question. What about how often are 3 meals plus 1 snack enough, or more small portions? So yeah, we're going to bring them into our rhythm. Again, if you're not having family meals or you're not eating 3 meals a day, it's a good chance to look at your rhythm. Best to improve ourselves. But initially, the baby might not be sitting down for 3 meals a day with especially at 6 months old. They're probably still sleeping at least a couple times a day. So go with the flow, it'll come. But just when your baby's up, let them come to the table with you, and then you can offer meals and snacks as it works for you. Yeah,
I think when I started, I think we started probably either at lunchtime, probably when after the baby's nap. For me it was easier to start just myself and the baby starting foods at lunch. And then we incorporated later on doing breakfast and lunch, and then a snack in between, and then also dinner sometimes. So it was really, like you said, working around the baby's nap schedules. Don't freak out if baby's missing one of those meals. It's okay, they will catch up. And you're going to notice as your babies get older, they're going to need more food, and they will be hungry, and their nap schedules will change. A baby who's, at 6 months is not having the same, there's 3 naps a day compared to a 9-month-old who has 2 naps a day. And you can fit 3 meals and 2 snacks in there, plus all the breastfeeding. It happens, or I find it happens organically. but not to stress out. You know, don't stress out about it. As long as baby's getting lots of milk and foods, it all works out, like Katya was saying.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I think another source sometimes for parents stress, especially around the 6 month checkup with a pediatrician, is there are a lot of questions about, are you still breastfeeding, and how is your baby sleeping, and what's your baby eating? And again, it's going to vary between 6 and 8 months. Some babies will have started foods around 5 months old, which is fine, and by 6 months are eating a bunch of things, and others haven't started. And depending where your baby's falling on that growth curve, you might get a certain amount of pressure or questions, especially if you've got a baby that's not at the 50th percentile. So the growth curve is one indicator.
They're smaller.
Yeah. And that feeding is going to come with time. And of course, if you've gotten 2 months old and your baby is not,
yeah, that's a stress.
Sorry. So I just lost Sylvia.
No, I go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay.
You might have lost me.
Okay, sorry. I was just saying that if your baby,
yeah,
there. Okay, so if your baby is 10 months old and still not interested in foods, you might want to just pursue that a little bit and make sure there's no developmental delays for other reasons. Keep offering. Check, look, put it in perspective. Is your baby stools and urine okay? Is your baby developing in other ways? Make sure you look at the big picture. And if you've progressed and your baby for example, at 1 year is still only eating purees and is refusing to pick up foods and refusing other textures, that's something else you might want to look into. Just again, put it in perspective of everything else.
Well, that's great. What a great conversation. Thank you so much, Katya. Thank you for everyone who, I think we've gone over all of the topics we wanted to talk about. I don't know if you see any last question there that you would like.
One more here from Ellie. Katya, have you included any recipes in your book for the first year, or can you recommend any good sources? No, I didn't include recipes. This book is really just questions and answers, very simply. And I always have a bit of an issue with that, because recipes, and I know there are some really great books out there on baby-led weaning recipes, but I always come back to baby-led weaning is supposed to simplify your life. And if you're making special recipes for your baby and special recipes for the rest of your kids in your family, it might be more complicated. If you love to cook, that's great. But I would just say to you, you can use any recipe that you like for your family. And the only thing you might need to adapt is texture sometimes. But even then, with baby-led weaning, your baby is going to learn to deal with all the different textures. Again, go ahead and make it spicy and flavorful. And you can even use salt in cooking. We just say don't put a lot of salt at the table, which none of us really need to do anyhow. And maybe just don't overdo it on sweet foods for the first year. But if you go to grandma's house and she gives your baby a cookie, it's probably not the end of the world, right? So there are some books. I don't have anything specific that I could recommend to you, but any cookbook. Your baby is just a mini person in a lot of ways, right? So just give them the chance to do that. But if I think of something, I'll add that, or you can always add your question later on and I'll come back to it.
I think as we approach the holidays, and I recall one of my neighbors talking to me about her mother-in-law feeding cookies to her daughter before she even did so. I think that's another, not to be, you can be strict and not give your kids sugars and sweets, but if it does happen and, and you didn't say yes, it's okay. It's as long as it's not every day. I think you're the best judge. You know your baby's best and your family. And well, thank you so much. Thank you everyone for your patience for our take 2 here. It was such a great talk, such a great topic, Katya, thank you so much. I'm glad you could make yourself available while you write your new book. It's very exciting. You'll let us know when that comes out.
Absolutely.
Everyone, please join us next week. We are going to be talking about intuitive parenting and how to listen to ourselves. And this can be even used with nutrition, right? Listening to ourselves and what our heart and soul are telling us. And that's with my friend Julie. Have a great week. If you do have other questions that we did not answer, put them in the comments. Katya and I will look at the comments and respond if we can. She will put her link to the book here in the comments as well. It's a great little book. I wish I'd had it when I started out. Have a great week, everybody. Thank you so much again, Katya.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.